This is More Than Money with Mapalo Makhu, brought to you by Sasfin Wealth.
Welcome to More Than Money. I'm Mapalo Makhu, a personal finance columnist, and I love having money conversations that change people's perspective about finances. Why am I doing this podcast, you might ask? To talk about money. Not the paper stuff. I mean the baggage, the feeling, the emotional, heart-wrenching stuff. We find this conversation so uncomfortable to have, which is why on this podcast, I have decided to have this very difficult conversations. We are going to have some difficult discussions because better money conversations lead to better money confidence, and healthy money dialogue leads to healthy money decisions. Welcome to today's exclusive interview with Dricus du Plessis, the reigning UFC middleweight champion. Welcome, Dricus.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to this.
You know what? Today's going to be very different because, you normally talk about sports, you normally talk about your championship, but today we want to know the man and how he handles his money. So, I've been going through most of your videos and your bio. You started with judo at the age of 5. What drew you to judo?
So the one thing is I started with martial arts at the age of 5 years with judo. And it was purely just, my brothers were doing it. I'm the youngest of 3 brothers. So one is 4 years older, one is 7 years older than me. And, I was there with them. They both were national champions. And, that was basically it. Is the fact that I was there and I was exposed to a sport. As a young boy, I looked up to my brothers and I still do. And that was purely it. It was never originally the goal to become a world champion, but I just enjoyed the martial arts and, seeing my brothers do good and wanting to compete with them and looking up to them. That's what got me into it.
Yeah, no, that is incredible. So just take me back to when you were young. What was your household like with your mom and dad and having 2 other brothers?
Yeah, so for me, I grew up at an incredible childhood. My 2 brothers, my best friends, and of course, my mom and dad, very supportive of all of us. No matter what we wanted to try, they would always take the time and to make sure that we got to practice. And if we were competing in whatever it may be, we competed in such a wide range of sports, from music, playing instruments, we danced, we did ballroom dancing. We did all these things, and, we played rugby very competitively, and athletics. No matter what it was, or whether we were good or bad at it, they were there to support. And, as long as we worked hard at it, they would always support us 100% in whatever it was that we were looking to do. And nothing has changed in that. My brothers are my biggest supporters, and so are my parents. That's one big part of that motivates me, is to make my family proud with all that support and the example that was set to me from my parents and my brothers. That was one thing that's a driving factor for me, and that's what motivated me to be something special.
Did your parents ever talk about money around the household?
Yeah, of course. I think, my dad is a business owner himself. He worked for somebody up until he started his own business too. And he's always been very, very strict on that, educating me on how you use your money, especially as a sports person, you have to realize that at some stage your career, you can't do this forever. But even before that, it was always a situation of teaching us the ins and outs of a business, teaching us how to work hard, firstly, and teaching us from a very young age, giving us these lessons that he's learned through his career as a businessman himself. And yeah, for them, it was very important to educate us in the field of business, running a business. And even if it wasn't starting up a business, even if it was just you were working, but what to do with your money to make sure that you keep it and make it more at the end of the day. That's the important part.
Was there a shift, because you said he started working for himself later on in life? Was there a shift in terms of how you guys lived, or that he had perhaps like an emergency fund? Because starting a business for anyone can be quite challenging.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's one thing my dad always did right. He was safe in the regard that his family always came first. So he never took unnecessary risks that could risk our family. And unfortunately, when you're starting a business, that's exactly what that is. You're almost throwing all your eggs in that basket. For us, I'm 100% convinced that if you're in a situation where you don't really have a choice to make this work, it's do or die, that is where you can perform the best. That pressure is the pressure that's going to create diamonds or crush you. And that was something that we were exposed to, looked up to, and we saw his business rise from the ground up until it became successful. And obviously, there was ups and downs, and we knew about these ups and downs, but for every problem, there was always a solution. There's always going to be problems, even problems that there's no way you can foresee them in the future. But at the end of the day, every problem has a solution, and it's up to you to go and find that solution. No matter what the challenge is or the problem that's in front of you, you take it head on, and at the end of the day, there's always a solution.
So tell me a bit about your mom. I mean, she is in a house full of boys. She must be a very formidable woman. Tell me a little bit about her.
Yeah, absolutely. My mom grew up with only brothers, two. They were 4 kids. She was the only girl. For her to get 3 boys, I assume she was perfectly bred for that. She knows what it's all about. So I can tell you, she's a no-nonsense woman when it comes to us. I think in the most regard, my mom and my dad's a lot softer on us than my mom. My mom is a tough woman, and if she wasn't, as 3 boys, we'd probably walk all over when it came to discipline, when it came to anything. But I can promise you that's not the case. She's not a woman that you're going to walk over no matter what. As boys, we always tried our best. You always try to be, as naughty boys, you try to get around, maybe throw in a lie here, try and outmaneuver your parents. My mom was always the wide awake one. There was no outmaneuvering that woman.
She sounds like my type of woman. So how has that played in your own discipline as a sportsman and just in the way you handle your finances as well?
Yeah, for me, when I've made bad decisions financially and, in life, that's part of life. You learn as you make those mistakes, and there's still a lot of mistakes to be made. But my dad would always be the one saying, listen, well, this happened now. So you made this mistake, but now we have to go. You can't sit and sulk about it. We need to find a solution. Let's make this right. And my mom would keep you accountable for that. My mom would make sure you made a mistake. And there was no beating around the bush, and still isn't. So, there was no feeling sorry for us. I can tell you that. And that is the way they raised us. There's no excuses. If you made the mistake, you own up to it and you fix it.
No, she sounds like an incredible woman. You mentioned that you've made some financial mistakes, as we all have. Can you tell me about one that stands out for you?
Yeah, I remember I saved up a lot of money off my first couple of fights. And I know the color variants in the game industry, so in terms of buffaloes, color variants, golden wildebeests, all that kind of stuff. It was a bubble that was just growing and growing. These things were going for crazy prices. And it was a black impala. That was the first money I saved. I think I saved after a couple of fights. I think I had 120,000 Rand that saved up. And this whole bubble just started growing and growing. And my brother said, okay, he'll buy the normal split females and I'll buy the big ram. I mean, around that time, some of those Impala went for 700,000 Rand, but this one was still a young one. And I got it for, I think, 124,000, if I'm not mistaken. People were getting rich so fast with this, but this was everybody knew this was going to be a bubble that's going to burst eventually. So did I. But I bought it and I said, now we're going to make money. And it wasn't even 2 weeks and that whole industry bubble just went. And 2 weeks later, I could sell that ram I bought, the investment, that Impala was worth 8,000 Rand. That is basically almost 120,000 loss in 2 weeks. And you wouldn't believe that wasn't the worst. Then we said, okay, well, if we get a lot of them, so we have 25 females, if we can have babies with all of them, get splits, get black ones, maybe get the black Impala, after maybe selling 10 of them, we're back in business. And it wasn't even a month. And some people came in, and poachers basically, and they put up, a trap for these Impala where they catch them in there. And we found that black ram dead, not even a month after buying it there. And so that was my first investment in investing in myself in terms of a business, trying to become rich quick with a gimmick. And that was the biggest lesson I've learned. I actually have the skull of that thing, and that I want to put a nameplate when I move into my house. I want to put that on and say mistake. Just call it mistake or lesson learned. Because that was it was a very expensive lesson. It was all the money I had at that stage, everything. That's a mistake you make when you see people get rich quick and you try to get rich quick and you don't do proper research. Because, I'm from a farming background, but we didn't do our research properly. We didn't see where the market was. We didn't look thoroughly to what can happen. And so that was such a big learning curve for me in terms of risk management. When you try and diverse your portfolio in terms of investment, don't take your first money or all your money and go into the highest risk you can possibly think of and think you're going to get rich, because it might pay off, but there's a very big chance it's not going to pay off. A small amount, maybe 10% of your investments going extreme high risk. Try to get at least 50% of your investments to safer option, and then getting 30 to 40% of medium risk. But, your biggest and only investment, maybe not go for the highest risk you can think of.
Jeez, that is incredible. But for me, it sounds like you learned a very valuable lesson. You know what? Slow and steady still wins the race for most people, isn't it?
100%. And there is unfortunately no getting rich quick. The saying that if your neighbor told you about this, it's probably too late to invest. So I mean that mistake. I mean I was very young. I think I was 21 years old when that happened. At that stage, it felt like the end of the world. But small price to pay to think about what that lesson meant to me in the future. We win or we learn. That's the one thing.
So now that you have grown in your career, I mean, you are the world champion. How does that feel, by the way? Like hearing that over and over again, how does that feel for you?
It feels amazing. I mean, it was a lot of years of hard work. That's also investing in yourself, going and saying, I'm not going to pursue a career in anything else. If this doesn't work out in terms of my youth and building experience, and I could have been working, saving money, and all my eggs was in this basket of, listen, this needs to work out. But when you invest in yourself like that, and not in something else like buying a black Impala, if you invest in yourself, then it comes down to what are you going to do with this opportunity? It was a much more educated risk than it was just one big risk. Your chances of becoming a world champion is very, very slim. It was up to me. That was the great thing. It wasn't up to a market. It wasn't up to anything else than me, my sacrifice, the hard work, and of course, there's a bit of luck in there as well.
You are listening to More Than Money, a podcast collaboration brought to you by Sasfin Wealth. At Sasfin Wealth, we empower our clients to reach their global investment goals, to retire with dignity, and to leave a lasting legacy. If you would like to have real money conversations, visit sasfin.com/wealth and talk to us. Enjoy the rest of the podcast.
I watched one of your videos and the other guy was talking smack. And one of the things that fascinated me about you is that you always come back to the game. And one of the things you said, I don't think of myself as the underdog. I never do. What I think is I'm going to get it done and I'm going to win. Where is that coming from for you?
I like to say we as South Africans are built different than the rest of the world in terms of the physicality part, but even in mindset, like we spoke about my upbringing, there was a goal to reach. And no matter what happens along the way, find a solution, see a problem, find a solution, and fix the problem. And that was how I was brought up. There was no feeling sorry for yourself. If I had to lose a fight, it was because I made a mistake or I didn't train hard enough. You have to take full responsibility. I won every fight because I knew how much work I put in. And the 2 fights that I had lost, those losses taught me more than any of my wins ever did, because you think you're working hard until you go up against somebody that maybe works harder than you. And then you realize, I need to step it up. The bar keeps being raised. So my mentality of knowing I'm going to best and knowing I'm going to win is because I honestly feel that I will outwork anybody. I think if you are passionate about anything in life, anything you do, no matter if it's in sport, whether it's in business, whether it's no matter what it is, if you're passionate about it and you're willing to work at it every single day and give it your all, I don't see a world where you can't be successful. I don't see a world where there's not going to be hiccups along the way. There's going to be a lot of failures. If you can learn from those failures aren't really failures. So yeah, that mindset 100% comes from the mistakes that I've made in the past and knowing not to make it again, and knowing what I did wrong to be where I am now. And of course, there's one thing in all aspects of life, no matter what it is, if you work hard enough, it will pay off.
So tell me that moment. I mean, your game was at 1 a.m. I think you said in one of your interviews, and you left the stadium like at 4 a.m. What was that moment like? You have been pronounced as the world champion. Your parents are both there. What did that feel like? Just the culmination of all these years of hard work and sweat and sacrifices, and your entire family is there. Because, I mean, you mentioned that they are your biggest support system.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that moment, it felt like 15 years of work towards one night. Even though I prepared myself mentally and visualizing how it's going to feel and knowing it's going to come, because I believe that 100%. There's no way you can justify in your head how that feels. There's no way you can envision what it feels like up until you're there. It felt like I had an outer body experience. It felt like it was the proudest moment of my life. It was, to put it into words, I don't think I have the vocabulary, but it did feel like, I mean, if you are a guy in any sort of business, it felt like I just signed $1 billion deal. It felt like everything that I've ever sacrificed was worth it, and I'll do it all over again.
So, of course, I mean, with this championship, your finances look completely different. Did you ever think about the money aspect to say, how am I going to manage my money going forward?
I always had the same mindset in terms of my finances. This is a high risk sport. Injuries happen and you only get paid when you fight. I mean, of course, now, as I became champion locally and I started to get more sponsors, and they are only there if you keep on winning. I was always very conservative with my money. I always have been, in terms of knowing that I have a life after the sport. Starting a business, I started a commercial gym when I was 20 years old. I mean, now the gym is one massive franchise. It's doing great. CIT Performance Institute here in Pretoria, and we are looking to branch out with franchises now within this year. I always knew I had to start building something, and obviously I have multiple companies in my portfolio now. And for me, I always knew that this sport, realistically, up until around 37, you can be competitive against the best of the world. Sometimes, there's cases where you're a bit longer, but I always knew I want to have a family one day, and I want to be able to look after them and put my kids in a school and be able to support them financially and emotionally there. And I knew that savings was massive for me. I've always been very good at it, and the mistakes that people made was, do you spend your money and you save what you have left at the end of the month? I took 50% of whatever I earned and put it away first. That's the first thing I do every month, and you live on the rest. And then, of course, thinking, cool, I'm living this high life. I'm getting paid as a world champion. Beautiful. You can't live on that standard. This is where I invest in my future and the future in Davis for when I'm done with this. Luckily, I have had the right people around me in terms of guiding me in that direction and not being an impulsive spender the whole time. Of course, the life is about balance. You can't only think about the future and just save all your money. That's not fun. Yeah, you have to reward yourself, of course, but within the bounds of not making reckless decisions and being impulsive with your money, because at the end of the day, you can get injured. Anything can happen, especially in sports. And we see this with many sports stars. Making sure you have the right people around you, trustworthy people, firstly, because you think you trust somebody, money makes people go crazy. That's unfortunately a fact. Being involved is a very important part. When it comes to my finances, always, even though there's people a lot smarter than me when it comes to finances, always keep your finger on it. Always be informed, because the further you are away from your money, the closer you are in losing it. And so even though there are people smarter than you, be involved in the decision making of your money. That's been a big secret for me. And a lot of people would say, you don't have to worry about these things. And I have some micromanagement issues. Unfortunately not. I'm a fan of doing business. I'm an entrepreneur, I would like to think so. When it comes to your own money and your own business, always be informed. And if you're not, get educated on it. With the internet today, any questions you might have, anything, it's all available. And be informed of where your money goes, what it's going for, and always make sure that you have a backup plan. Let's say, for instance, COVID. When COVID happened, I couldn't fight for more than a year and a half. We weren't allowed to compete. So there was no money coming in. I was prepared for that because my whole life, I always had that in the back of my mind. What if something happens? And something happened. I mean, I think it caught the whole world off guard. And we saw with a lot of people how people were struggling financially, because I had that backup, I had that savings, which I've been saving for all those years, for 6-7 years, to help me through those times. And I was able to bounce back from that.
And I love the fact that, you're quite clear about the people you keep around you, that they have to be trustworthy people, that people you can rely on. And I assume that even your parents are still a big part of that, and your brothers as well.
100%. My middle brother is a lawyer. When it comes to my companies and it comes to my finances, my brother is somebody I trust like myself. I know he has my best interest at heart, not only his. One of my biggest business partners and one of my biggest businesses is my oldest brother. And of course, my dad is always there. I mean, he's the man I go to for advice. My brother is a lawyer. He's very educated on all these things. When it comes to what you're allowed to do, when it comes to legislation and the things to look out for, when it comes to reading a contract, because fine print catches a lot of people. That helps. And to have that circle, the people I have around me, keep it as close as possible and try and keep it with the people that were there from the beginning, because you get a lot of extra friends once you become big.
What is your biggest splurge so far? Like what you just went out and said, you know what, I'm not going to think too much about it. I'm going to enjoy myself. There must be one.
So that's the one thing. When I was 23 years old, I saved up enough money and, I had to make a decision, and I wanted to buy a nice car so badly. I was in it. I said, cool, I want to buy maybe a sports car because I love speed. I love cars. I'm very enthusiastic about it. And I was thinking, okay, I have enough money saved that I can month to month, maybe I can buy myself a car. I made the smart decision. I bought a house. I invested in property. I'm really happy about that now. I always wanted a Ford Mustang, a Ford Mustang. It was a muscle car. It was my biggest dream. It was maybe, I think, almost 2 years ago. My coach, he owns a car dealership, and there was one on his floor, and it was everything I've ever dreamed about. So I said no a couple of years ago to this car and made the right decision. And I said to myself, listen, I haven't made a big impulsive decision like this. I think it's time to spoil yourself, and you have to also reward yourself for the work you've put in. And that was probably the biggest one yet, buying yourself a sports car. That was it.
I can imagine also now, because you're the world champion, there are some things that have changed in terms of how you move. Do you still drive around by yourself in your Mustang, or, you enjoy the Mustang for a couple of years and now you drive something else?
I have more than one car. For me, the Mustang is the one that stays in the garage and gets taken out on weekends. You can't get used to it. It's and every single time I get in it, I have thought about selling it because you don't drive it as often. But every time I drive it, it gives me that feeling, man, it's a proud moment when you it's something. Since I was a kid, a Mustang like this, a muscle car was my dream. And once I worked and I had the ability to buy one, I just thought to myself, now every time I drive it, that's a reminder of the work I've put in and the reward you get for that hard work.
What would you say to young people who are coming up and, they want to do something similar, advising them both on their finances and just how to build that mindset that I am a winner, I can be a winner, and with all the sacrifices that you've made?
Obviously, money is something you always have to consider when you're making decisions. But I was so passionate about this sport and what I wanted to accomplish in it. Now, like I said, you can apply this to any area of life, any industry. It doesn't have to be sport. And I told myself, I want to be the best in the world. And money was never my decision to why I want to do this. Because money is so materialistic in terms of happiness, because you can't buy that. What I would say is money is like a butterfly. I read it in a book once. If you're going to chase it the whole time, it will always be just out of reach at your fingertips, if that's the only thing you chase. If you have passion and you are chasing a dream and a goal, money will come like that butterfly and sit on your shoulder sometimes randomly. And that's how I lived my life. I never started to do this for money. Unfortunately, money makes the world go round. But it was never my driving factor in making money. Being successful and being happy and doing what you love is worth much, much more than any zero. It's being able to wake up every day and do what I love is the biggest blessing I have. And the money is just a counterproduct of that. It's just a byproduct of the hard work you're willing to put in. You're always going to be willing to work harder at something you love, regardless of what it is. If you love finances, go right for it. Even though it sounds boring to me, and I would hate to do finances. People that are passionate about it, they love doing it. So be the best at it and, do what you love. If you do what you love every day, you're not working. You are living your best life, because remember, your work is more than half your life. But one thing that I would honestly tell anybody coming up, young kids, not even about sport, anything you do, make sure you love it more than anything, because it's a big, big part of your life. And if you love it, you will always be good at it.
That is brilliant. And I think with that, Dricus, we are going to end it right there. I have loved this interview so much. And I think with this interview, people are going to see another side to you other than just the sportsman. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was a great chat.
This was a Sasfin Wealth podcast. Visit sasfin.com/wealth for more information.